All right, voters in the United Kingdom dealt a big win to Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative Party in yesterday's historic election.
Johnson says the election results are, quote, irrefutable mandate in support of Brexit. Last night's victory was also a rebuke of the Labour Party and their left-leaning social agenda. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Mark Phillips has the latest from London.
In the end, it wasn't even close. Boris Johnson's victory means that will they, won't they Brexit saga now at least has an end in sight. But this may be just the end of the beginning.
A new dawn rises on a new day.
And what a new day it is for the victorious Boris Johnson. He had delivered a, pick your adjective, thumping, comprehensive, devastating, complete victory. He had gambled, stuck to his plan, and won, with a simple message his audience knew well.
With this mandate and this majority, we will at last be able to do what?
So Boris Johnson and his partner, Carrie Symonds, returned to the Prime Minister's residence in Downing Street to get Brexit done. He now will be able to pull Britain out of the European Union by the end of next month, as he promised, but he has a long battle ahead of him in working out a new trade deal with the EU and with the rest of the world, including the United States for that matter. Johnson won this election by literally stealing his opponent's lunch, taking away traditional working-class votes from the Labour Party in Britain's post-industrial northern Rust Belt, the same sort of disaffected blue-collar vote that helped elect Donald Trump. Labour's leader, Jeremy Corbyn, who led his party to its worst defeat in decades, says he'll quit, but he won't say when. And he blamed his defeat on Brexit.
Brexit has so polarised and divided debate in this country. It has overridden so much of a normal political debate.
With his big majority, Boris Johnson says he will try to bring this fractured country together. He got the country's votes, but he'll now have to earn its trust. Boris Johnson now has a lot of political capital to spend, and with the opposition here in complete disarray, he now also has time on his side. Anne-Marie, Vlad.
All right, Mark, thank you very much. So with more on the UK election, let us bring in CBS News correspondent Ian Lee, who is joining us from London. Ian, we spoke a little earlier, I think yesterday, what I was hearing, I think Mark might have even said it, that, Boris Johnson's probably going to win, but it's not going to be a massive win. It was a massive win.
It was an absolute landslide. We heard all the adjectives from Mark in his report. But yeah, this was the worst defeat of Labour since 1935. And so there's going to be a lot of soul searching in the Labour Party. But when it comes to Boris Johnson, he definitely has a mandate to move forward with Brexit and with his agenda.
So I'm really interested in this sort of landslide victory for the Tories, Ian, because is it a combination of people just wanting to get this over and done with and the fact that Jeremy Corbyn was deeply unpopular? In other words, if it had been another candidate, would the defeat have been, would we have seen what we saw yesterday, or would it have been a bit of a closer race?
I think it's about a mix of both of all that, Vlad. When I was out there talking to voters, one thing that came up a number of times was the best of the worst options. No one who we spoke with at one polling station really was enthusiastic. There were some, but the one thing I think it really came down to was for Boris Johnson, he promised, and as we heard time and time again, that he was going to get Brexit done. And it was a definitive time period that he said he was going to accomplish that. And since the last 3 years, people have been wondering what is going to happen. Well, he finally said he was going to get it done. And when you look at the Labour Party, they were a bit wishy-washy on the issue. And I think that resonated with a lot of voters that enough is enough. We want to get this over with, and we want to move forward as a country.
So getting Brexit done, though, is a little more complicated than it sounds. Sure, he's going to have to pull, Britain out of the agreement, but then he's got to negotiate other agreements because you can't just have no trade agreements at all.
Yeah, can you believe that the last 3 years we've just been talking about phase one? There is a phase two. So once they agree to withdraw from the European Union, that's when they have to start the negotiations of a future trade deal with the EU and the United Kingdom. And so negotiations will start, but there needs to be a final agreement by the end of June, and that is the point at which the UK has to decide whether or not to extend this transitional period from leaving the EU. They can do it between 1 to 2 years, but Prime Minister Johnson has said that there isn't going to be any extension. So if there is no trade deal by June, then that means that the UK faces the prospect of leaving without one by the end of December of 2020. So there's a lot riding here between now and June to try to get some sort of agreement between the UK and the EU when it comes to trade.
Ian, are there lessons to be drawn from what happens next with regards to labor? You're essentially looking at those who support Jeremy Corbyn, socialists and social democrats. In other words, the very left-leaning or extreme left of the party versus the more moderate center-left. And are there lessons to be drawn here in the 2020 election with the extreme left represented by Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and some of the more moderate Democrats, or not at all similar?
Well, you know, the one thing that we saw with Jeremy Corbyn is he didn't have a real clear platform when it came to Brexit. People kept asking reporters time after time, where do you stand on Brexit? And he said, well, we're going to have our own Brexit agreement with the EU, but at the end, we're going to give voters an option to remain and scrap Brexit altogether. And so Labour Party has been criticized for not really having a strong position, being wishy-washy. And I think that's why a lot of people went over to the Conservative Party, you know, and as well as you look at Jeremy Corbyn, he's a polarizing figure. He said that Brexit was polarizing. Well, there's members of his own party that say he's polarizing, and so his own personality probably put off a lot of voters there too. So you know, that was one of the big downfalls of Labour in this election. You know, I guess if you were to say anything about the 2020 election in the United States, popularity, having a candidate that resonates with a broad range of people is going to be important.
That's a great point, Ian. In other words, the candidates do matter. It's who people really like, who people have an affinity for, who people can get behind. And if you don't have that, if you have somebody who's unpopular and he's representing your party, not good.
Yeah, clearly, even when we're talking about a parliamentary setup where you're not actually voting for the leader, you're voting for the party.
But if the representative of that party is not someone who's popular with the folks, then it can be a problem.
Yeah. Ian, thank you.
You got to galvanize them.
Yes,
you
indeed.
do indeed. Thanks, Ian.